3 months ago, my son invited me to lunch at his favorite steakhouse in downtown Denver. We talked about the Broncos, his work as a financial advisor, the usual topics fathers and sons cover over medium rare ribeyes. Then, he mentioned estate planning, suggested I update my documents, offered to introduce me to an attorney who specialized in protecting retirement assets. A week later, I sat in that attorney's office, pen in hand, ready to sign papers that would have given my son complete control over everything I'd spent 40 years building. That's when the bank manager leaned close and whispered 4 words that changed everything. Don't sign those documents. 5 minutes later, I was in her private office, and what she told me turned my world upside down. Before I continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The morning started ordinary enough. I woke at 6:30, same as I had for the past 42 years, though now without the alarm clock that used to jolt me awake for my shift at the aerospace engineering firm. Retirement had been my reward after 4 decades of 12-hour days and weekend projects. The pension was solid. The 401k had grown to just over $1, $8 million through careful investing. And the house in Highlands Ranch that Margaret and I had bought in 1989 was now worth around $650,000, according to the latest Zillow estimate. Margaret. 3 years gone this November. Breast cancer took her in 6 months, from diagnosis to funeral. The grief had dulled to a constant ache, manageable most days, crushing on others. Scott had been good about checking in after his mother died. Weekly calls turned into monthly lunches, and I appreciated the effort. He was busy with his practice, managing portfolios for high-net-worth clients, and Rachel worked long hours in marketing. They had their own lives. I poured coffee and checked my phone. A text from Scott, sent at 7 a.m. Still good for 10 a.m. appointment? Address is 1755 Blake Street, Suite 400. Attorney's name is David Chen. Looking forward to getting this done, Dad. The estate planning meeting. Scott had brought it up over lunch 3 weeks ago at Elway's. We'd been talking about the Avalanche's playoff chances when he shifted gears. Dad, have you thought about updating your will? You know, with Mom gone and everything changing? I had thought about it. The will Margaret and I had drawn up in 2003 left everything to each other. Then to Scott if we both passed. Simple, straightforward. It's still valid, I'd said. Sure, but tax laws have changed. There are better ways to structure things now. Trusts, asset protection strategies. I work with an attorney who specializes in this stuff. David Chen. He's brilliant. Could save you hundreds of thousands in estate taxes. Something in his tone had felt off, but I couldn't pinpoint what. Too rehearsed, maybe. Or too eager. But he was my son, a licensed financial advisor with credentials from the CFP board. If he said I needed updated documents, who was I to argue? Okay, I'd agreed. Set something up. Now, 3 weeks later, I dressed in slacks and a button-down shirt, the kind of business casual that felt appropriate for signing important legal documents. The drive to downtown Denver took 40 minutes. I found parking in a garage on Wasey Street and walked 2 blocks to the address Scott had texted. The building was modern glass and steel, the lobby sleek and expensive looking. The directory listed Chen and Associates on the 4th floor. I took the elevator up and found suite 400 at the end of a carpeted hallway. Scott was already there, standing in the reception area with a man I assumed was David Chen. Mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of polished presentation that screamed success. They were laughing about something when I walked in. "Dad!" Scott crossed the room and hugged me, something he rarely did. "Right on time. David, this is my father, Thomas Bradley." We shook hands. Chen's grip was firm, his smile professionally warm. "Mr. Bradley, pleasure to meet you. Scott's told me a lot about you. 42 years at Lockheed Martin. That's impressive. Let's go to the conference room, and we'll walk you through everything." The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown. A folder sat on the polished table, at least 2 inches thick with documents. "Now," Chen began, settling into a chair and opening the folder. "Scott's brought you in because we've identified some significant opportunities to protect your assets and minimize tax exposure. What we're looking at is an irrevocable trust structure that will shield your retirement accounts and real property from estate taxation. He slid a document across to me. The language was dense, full of legal terminology that might as well have been Sanskrit. The key here is moving your assets into the trust now, while you're still in good health. That starts the clock on the 5-year look-back period for Medicaid purposes, and it removes the assets from your taxable estate immediately. I'm not worried about Medicaid, I said. I have long-term care insurance. Of course. But this also protects against creditors, lawsuits, and provides for seamless transfer to your beneficiaries. Scott will serve as trustee, managing the assets according to the trust terms. I looked at my son. He was nodding, looking earnest and concerned. It makes sense, Dad. This way, if anything happens to you, there's no probate, no delays. Everything continues smoothly. But I can still access my money, right? I mean, it's my retirement. Chen and Scott exchanged a glance. Quick, but noticeable. The trust provides for distributions, Chen said carefully. The trustee, in this case Scott, would approve withdrawals based on the trust terms. It's all very standard. Something cold settled in my stomach. So I'd have to ask my son's permission to access my own money? It's not like that, Dad, Scott said quickly. It's just a formality. Obviously, you'd have access to whatever you need, but having it in the trust protects it. Think about it. What if you got sued? What if you had a car accident and someone came after your assets? This shields everything. I'd driven the same route to the grocery store for 30 years without incident, but I didn't say that. Let me ask you something, I said instead. If this is such a good idea, why didn't you mention it before? Why now? Scott's smile tightened slightly. Because I've been researching strategies for my clients and realized my own father doesn't have any of these protections in place. Better late than never, right? Chen slid more documents across the table. We'll need signatures here, here, and here. I'll notarize everything. Then we'll coordinate with your bank to transfer the retirement accounts and file the property deed transfer. The bank. That reminded me. I'll need to stop by Wells Fargo after this, I said. Get some paperwork from them for the account transfers. Another glance between Scott and Chen. Faster this time. Actually, Chen said, we can handle all that. You just need to sign authorization forms, and we'll coordinate directly with the financial institutions. I'd rather be there, I said. I like to understand what's happening with my money. Of course, Scott said. Whatever makes you comfortable, Dad. We can all go over to the Wells Fargo on 17th Street after we finish here. The documents sat in front of me, page after page of whereas and heretofore and party of the first part. I picked up the pen Chen offered. Before you sign, Chen said, I should mention there's a fee for setting up the trust. $15,000, payable today. We can deduct it from the trust assets once they're transferred, or you can write a check now. $15,000. I thought about the guy who'd done Margaret's and my will back in 2003. He'd charged $800. That seems steep, I said. It's comprehensive estate planning, Chen replied smoothly. Trust creation, asset transfer documents, ongoing administration. We're talking about protecting nearly $2.5 million in assets. The fee is very reasonable for that level of service. I looked at Scott. You think this is worth it? Absolutely, Dad. David's one of the best in the business. I put pen to paper on the first signature line, then hesitated. Something felt wrong. The urgency, the fee, the way they kept exchanging looks. Margaret used to say I had good instincts, that I could sense when something was off in a blueprint before I even ran the calculations. You know what? I said, setting down the pen. Let me think about this overnight, read through everything more carefully. Scott's face changed, just for a second. Frustration flashed across his features before he caught himself. Dad, we've got everything set up. The notary's here. The documents are ready. If we wait, we'll have to reschedule David's time, and he's booked solid for the next month. Then I'll wait a month, I said, standing up. I'm not signing something this big without understanding it completely. Chen started gathering the documents, his professional smile intact but cooler. Of course, Mr. Bradley, though I should mention, delay has costs. Every day your assets remain unprotected is a day of exposure. I'll take my chances, I said. The drive from Chen's office to the Wells Fargo on 17th Street took 12 minutes. Scott had offered to come with me, but I'd declined, told him I had some other errands to run. The truth was, I wanted to think, and I couldn't do that with him hovering. I parked in a metered spot and walked into the bank. It was mid-morning on a Thursday, not crowded. I approached the teller counter, intending to verify the balance on my retirement accounts, make sure everything was as it should be. I'd like to check the status of my accounts, I told the young woman behind the counter. Thomas Bradley. She typed on her computer, then her expression shifted slightly. Mr. Bradley, let me get Elena Rodriguez for you. She's our branch manager. One moment. That was odd. I just wanted a balance check. Elena Rodriguez appeared from an office in the back, a woman in her mid-50s with sharp eyes and a professional manner. Mr. Bradley, would you mind coming to my office for a moment? The cold feeling in my stomach returned. Her office was small but tidy, with family photos on the desk and a framed banking certification on the wall. She closed the door and gestured for me to sit. Mr. Bradley, I'm glad you came in. I've been debating whether to call you. There's been some activity on your accounts that I wanted to discuss. What kind of activity? She pulled up something on her computer screen. 2 weeks ago, we received authorization forms requesting that account statements for your 401k rollover IRA and your brokerage account be sent to a different address. The request appeared to have your signature. I didn't authorize that. I didn't think so. The signature looked off. Not quite right. I flagged it for review and held the change. She turned the screen toward me. Is this your signature? The document showed a signature that looked similar to mine, but not identical. Someone had practiced it, gotten close, but hadn't quite nailed the way I looped the B in Bradley. No, I said. That's not my signature. Who requested the change? The form came through your son's financial advisory firm, Scott Bradley, at Highlands Wealth Management. The room seemed to tilt slightly. My son forged my signature? Elena's expression was sympathetic but firm. I can't make that determination. But I can tell you that something didn't feel right, so I stopped the change. Then this morning, I received another request. This one asking us to prepare paperwork for transferring your IRA to an irrevocable trust. She paused. A trust in which you wouldn't be the trustee. I was just at an attorney's office, I said slowly. They wanted me to sign documents setting up exactly that kind of trust. My son set up the meeting. Elena leaned back in her chair. Mr. Bradley, I'm going to share something personal with you. 5 years ago, my husband's son from his first marriage convinced him to sign over his savings to a family trust. Said it was for estate planning purposes. Within 6 months, my stepson had drained the accounts and disappeared to Costa Rica. We never recovered the money, and my husband died last year, still heartbroken that his own child had betrayed him. She let that sink in for a moment. When I saw these requests coming through your son's firm, using a signature that didn't quite match, I recognized the pattern. I don't know your situation. Maybe your son has the best intentions. But I've seen this before, and I won't be part of it without being absolutely certain you know what you're authorizing. I sat there, trying to process what she was telling me. Scott, my son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, whose college I'd paid for, who'd cried at his mother's funeral. What should I do? I asked. First, we're going to put alerts on all your accounts. No changes without you physically coming into the branch with ID and confirming in person. Second, I'd recommend you consult with an attorney, not the one your son referred you to, an independent attorney who specializes in elder law. Third, she hesitated. Third, you might want to have a very frank conversation with your son about his finances. In my experience, when adult children suddenly push for control of parents' assets, there's usually a reason, and it's usually not a good one. I drove home in a daze. The house felt empty when I walked in, as it had every day since Margaret died. But today the emptiness felt different, heavier. I made coffee, I didn't drink, and sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone. Should I call Scott? Confront him? Or was I jumping to conclusions? Maybe the signature thing was a mistake. Maybe the trust was legitimate. But Elena's words kept echoing. When adult children suddenly push for control of parents' assets, there's usually a reason. I thought about the past 3 months. Scott's increased attention, the lunches, the calls, the way he'd steered conversations toward my finances, asked questions about my accounts, my property taxes, my monthly expenses. And before that, I tried to remember the last time Scott had called just to talk, not because he needed something or wanted something. Christmas? No, he and Rachel had been in Cabo for Christmas. Thanksgiving? They'd come for dinner but left early. Something about Black Friday shopping. My laptop sat on the counter. I opened it and navigated to my Wells Fargo account, entering the password I'd been using for years. Everything looked normal. The IRA showed its balance, $1,843,592. The checking account had $4,231. The money market account held another $50,000 for emergencies. I clicked through transaction histories, looking for anything unusual. Everything seemed in order. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe Elena was projecting her own bad experience onto my situation. Then I noticed something in the document archive section. 3 PDF files I didn't recognize, uploaded 2 weeks ago. I clicked on the first one. It was a power of attorney form, granting Scott authority to make financial decisions on my behalf, with my signature at the bottom, except I hadn't signed it, hadn't even seen it before this moment. The second document was a beneficiary change form for my IRA, naming Scott as primary beneficiary instead of the charitable trust Margaret and I had set up. The third was a request to add Scott as joint owner on my checking account. All 3 had signatures that looked like mine but weren't. I called Elena Rodriguez. "Mr. Bradley?" She answered on the second ring. "I need to file a police report," I said. "And I need a lawyer. Not tomorrow. Today." "I'll make some calls," she said. "Come back to the bank in an hour. I'll have people here to help." The next hour passed in a blur. I took screenshots of the forged documents. I went through my email, searching for anything from Scott's firm. Found a chain from 2 months ago where he'd asked for my account numbers, said he wanted to make sure I was properly diversified. I'd sent them, trusting him. My son, my only child, the person I'd loved unconditionally for 38 years, had tried to steal everything from me. When I returned to the bank, Elena had assembled a small team. A detective from the Denver Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit, an attorney named Patricia Walsh, who specialized in elder law and financial abuse, and a fraud investigator from Wells Fargo's Corporate Security Division. They listened to my story, examined the documents, asked questions I could barely answer through the numbness that had settled over me. "Mr. Bradley," Detective Morrison said, "I need to be straight with you. This is textbook financial elder abuse. The forged signatures alone are felony forgery. If your son had succeeded in getting you to sign those trust documents, it would have been financial exploitation of an at-risk adult. We're looking at serious charges." "He's my son," I said, and my voice broke on the word. Patricia Walsh leaned forward, her expression kind but firm. "That doesn't give him the right to steal from you. In fact, it makes it worse. He exploited your trust, your love for him. This isn't a misunderstanding or a mistake. This was calculated and deliberate." The Wells Fargo investigator, a woman named Jennifer Chen, no relation to the attorney, she assured me, showed me more evidence they'd uncovered. "We pulled the IP addresses from where those documents were uploaded. They came from your son's office computer at Highlands Wealth Management. We also found that he'd called our customer service line 6 times in the past month, trying to get information about your accounts. Our reps didn't give him anything because he couldn't verify he was authorized, but he was definitely phishing." "What do I do now?" I asked. Detective Morrison pulled out a notepad. "We start by taking your formal statement. Then we investigate, talk to the attorney, David Chen, pull phone records, build a case. In the meantime, you need to protect yourself. Change all your passwords. Put credit freezes in place. Consider getting a restraining order." "A restraining order against my own son? If he's willing to forge your signature and try to steal $2 million, what else is he willing to do?" Morrison's voice was gentle but serious. "We've seen cases where financial abuse escalates. I'm not trying to scare you, But you need to take this seriously. Patricia Walsh handed me her card. I'm going to draft a cease and desist letter to your son and to David Chen's firm. I'm also going to petition for an emergency protective order for your assets. And we need to have a conversation about your estate planning, done properly this time, with your interests protected. Over the next week, I learned more than I ever wanted to know about my son's life. Detective Morrison's investigation revealed that Scott wasn't just a financial advisor. He was a financial advisor in serious trouble. The Colorado Division of Securities was investigating him for unauthorized trading in client accounts. He'd lost $280,000 of client money in cryptocurrency speculation and was desperately trying to cover the losses before his clients discovered what he'd done. Rachel's marketing firm was a shell company. She'd been fired from her actual job 8 months ago and had been pretending to go to work every day while secretly maxing out credit cards and taking out payday loans. Together, they were drowning in debt. The house in Cherry Creek that I'd been so proud of them for buying? 3 months behind on mortgage payments, foreclosure proceedings initiated. My retirement accounts weren't just their salvation. They were their last hope. The phone calls started 2 days after Detective Morrison visited Scott at his office. First, from Scott himself, angry and defensive. "Dad, what the hell? You called the cops on me? Over a misunderstanding?" "You forged my signature," I said. My voice sounded dead even to my own ears. "That was just to update some paperwork. You were going to sign it anyway. I was just trying to streamline the process. You tried to steal my money." "Steal? Jesus Christ, Dad. You're my father. It would have gone to me eventually anyway. I was just trying to help you avoid estate taxes." The audacity of it took my breath away. "Don't call me again," I said, and hung up. Then Rachel called, crying. "Dad, Tom, please, you don't understand what you're doing. Scott's under so much pressure. His clients are threatening him. We could lose everything. We just needed some help to get through this rough patch." "By stealing from me?" "We weren't stealing. We were going to pay it back." Scott had a plan. "Please, you have to drop the charges. He's your son. This will destroy his career." "He destroyed his own career when he started gambling with other people's money," I said, and ended the call. The investigation moved forward. David Chen, it turned out, wasn't even a licensed attorney. He was a former paralegal who'd been disbarred in California for ethical violations and had reinvented himself in Colorado as an estate planning specialist. His suite of offices? Rented by the hour from an executive office service. The fancy letterhead? Printed at FedEx. Scott had found him through some online network of people who specialized in elder financial scams. Chen would create the fraudulent trusts, take his cut, and move on. He'd done it to at least 7 other families that Detective Morrison could verify. The criminal charges were filed on a Tuesday in late September. Scott was arrested at his office, cuffed in front of his remaining clients. Rachel was picked up at a Target in Lone Tree, trying to return $400 worth of clothes she'd bought on a stolen credit card. I wasn't there for any of it. Patricia Walsh called to tell me, her voice professional but sympathetic. Scott's being charged with felony forgery, attempted theft, and financial exploitation of an at-risk adult. Rachel's looking at credit card fraud and conspiracy. The DA is pushing for significant prison time. "How much time?" I asked. "For Scott? 5 to 10 years if convicted on all counts. Rachel, maybe 3 to 5. My son, in prison, for trying to rob his own father. I should have felt satisfaction, justice, something. Instead, I just felt hollow." The preliminary hearing was scheduled for November 15th. I didn't attend, but Patricia went and reported back. Scott had pleaded not guilty, claimed I had authorized everything, said I was confused, possibly experiencing early dementia, that he'd only been trying to protect me from myself. "His public defender is arguing diminished capacity on your part," Patricia said. "They're going to try to paint you as an unreliable witness." "I'm 64 years old and I have all my faculties," I said. "I know. We'll establish that through medical records and testimony. But it's going to be ugly, Tom. He's going to attack your credibility, your memory, maybe even your relationship with Margaret. Anything to create reasonable doubt." The trial was set for February. In December, Scott's attorney approached Patricia with a plea deal offer. Scott would plead guilty to attempted theft and forgery in exchange for the other charges being dropped. The DA was recommending 4 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 2. "What do you think?" I asked Patricia. "I think it saves you from having to testify against your son. It gives him a chance at a lighter sentence while still holding him accountable. But it's your call, Tom. If you want to push for the maximum, we can go to trial." I thought about it for 3 days. Imagined myself on the witness stand, testifying about how my own child had tried to rob me. Imagined Scott's attorney tearing apart my testimony, suggesting I was senile or vindictive or confused. "Take the deal," I told Patricia. The sentencing hearing was on January 20th. I made myself go to that one. Sat in the back of the courtroom and watched my son, dressed in an orange jumpsuit, stand before Judge Catherine Martinez. The prosecutor outlined the crimes: the forged signatures, the fake trust, the conspiracy with David Chen, the $280,000 in client funds Scott had lost gambling on cryptocurrency. Then Scott's attorney spoke, painting a picture of a desperate man overwhelmed by circumstances, a devoted son who'd made terrible choices but who loved his father. Finally, Judge Martinez asked if Scott wanted to say anything. He stood, turned, and looked directly at me for the first time. "Dad," he said, and his voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I was drowning, and I panicked. I thought if I could just get access to your accounts, I could fix everything, make it right. I never meant to hurt you. I love you." I sat there, frozen. Part of me wanted to believe him, wanted to stand up and forgive him and make this nightmare go away. But I thought about Elena Rodriguez's husband, heartbroken that his son had betrayed him. Thought about the 7 other families David Chen had scammed. Thought about what might have happened if Elena hadn't flagged those forged signatures. Scott would have taken everything. And when the money ran out, he would have disappeared, leaving me with nothing for my final years. "I'm sorry too," I whispered, knowing he couldn't hear me. Judge Martinez sentenced Scott to 4 years in the Colorado Department of Corrections. Rachel, who had taken a separate plea deal, got 18 months plus restitution. David Chen, facing charges in multiple jurisdictions, was looking at a decade or more. I walked out of the courthouse into a gray January afternoon. Patricia walked with me to my car. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I thought I'd feel better once it was over, but I just feel empty." That's normal. Grief isn't just for death. You can grieve the loss of the relationship you thought you had, the son you thought you knew. Will it get easier? She was quiet for a moment. Eventually. But it leaves a scar. My advice? Don't try to tough it out alone. Talk to someone. A therapist, a support group for elder abuse survivors. You went through a trauma. Treat it like one. I took her advice. Started seeing a counselor named Dr. Rebecca Foster, who specialized in family estrangement and financial abuse trauma. She helped me understand that what Scott had done wasn't my fault, that I hadn't failed as a father, that adults make their own choices regardless of how they were raised. I also joined a support group at the senior center. Listened to other people's stories. A woman whose daughter had stolen her identity and taken out $50,000 in credit cards. A man whose son had convinced him to invest in a fake business venture. A couple whose grandson had forged their signatures and sold their house while they were on vacation. We'd all been betrayed by people we loved. We'd all survived. We all carried scars. In February, I finally dealt with my estate planning properly. Patricia connected me with a legitimate attorney who specialized in elder law. We set up a revocable living trust with an independent corporate trustee. Updated my will to leave everything to charities I cared about, the Alzheimer's Association in Margaret's memory, a scholarship fund at the University of Colorado for engineering students. Scott would inherit nothing, not because I was punishing him, but because I'd learned that leaving money to someone who'd already tried to steal it was like leaving matches with an arsonist. I also worked with Elena Rodriguez to set up additional account protections. 2-factor authentication, verbal passwords required for any changes, alerts for any transaction over $500. "You've made yourself as secure as possible," Elena said during one of our meetings. "But Tom, At some point, you have to also try to live again. Your son's choices can't define the rest of your life. She was right, but I didn't know how to do that. The house felt enormous and empty. I'd never been good at making friends, had always focused on work and family. Now, work was gone, and family had imploded. One Saturday in March, I drove to REI and bought a backpack and hiking boots. Started going to Rocky Mountain National Park every weekend, walking trails I'd driven past for 40 years but never explored. The physical exertion helped. The silence of the mountains provided a kind of peace I couldn't find anywhere else. I also started volunteering at a community center in Littleton, teaching basic financial literacy to seniors. Helped people understand their bank statements, spot scam phone calls, protect themselves from fraud. Shared my story when it felt appropriate. My own son tried to steal from me. I'd tell the classes, if it can happen in my family, it can happen in any family. Trust is good, but verification is better. Protect yourselves. In April, I got a letter from Scott. He'd been transferred to a minimum security facility in Cañon City. The letter was 4 pages long, handwritten, full of apologies and explanations, and promises to make things right when he got out. I read it once, then put it in a drawer. Didn't respond. Dr. Foster asked me about it in our next session. Do you feel guilty for not writing back? No, I said. Is that wrong? There's no wrong way to feel about this, Tom. He violated your trust in the most fundamental way. You don't owe him forgiveness. Part of me wants to forgive him, I admitted. He's still my son. And another part? Another part remembers sitting in David Chen's office with a pen in my hand, about to sign documents that would have given Scott everything. Remembers how good he was at lying, how convincing. If Elena hadn't stopped those forged signatures, I'd be broke right now. Or dead, maybe. Who knows what he would have done if he'd gotten desperate enough? Do you think he would have hurt you physically? I thought about it honestly. I don't know. And that's what scares me most. I don't know my own son anymore. Maybe I never did. Summer came. I turned 65, celebrated alone with a steak dinner and a Colorado Rockies game on TV. Scott would be eligible for parole in 2 years. I tried not to think about what would happen then. In July, I got a call from Elena Rodriguez. Tom, I wanted to let you know something. We've started a program at the bank, training for all our staff on recognizing signs of elder financial abuse. We're using your case, with your permission, as a teaching example. We've already caught 2 other situations because employees remembered the red flags from your story. You saved 2 other people from what happened to me? We did, and we wanted to thank you. If you hadn't been willing to press charges, to go through the whole criminal process, we wouldn't have had the framework to build this program. You helped more people than you know. After we hung up, I sat on my deck and watched the sun set over the Front Range. Thought about the 7 other families David Chen had scammed. The 2 families the bank had saved. The people in my financial literacy classes who now knew how to protect themselves. Scott had tried to destroy me. Instead, he'd inadvertently made me part of something larger. A small network of people working to protect the vulnerable, to stop predators who targeted their own family members. It wasn't the legacy I'd imagined, but it was something. In September, almost a year after everything fell apart, I went to Margaret's grave for the first time since the investigation began. Brought flowers, pulled weeds from around the headstone, sat on the grass, and talked to her like I used to do in our kitchen. Our son tried to rob me, I said aloud. I had him arrested. He's in prison. And I think I did the right thing. But Margaret, I wish you were here to tell me if I did. The wind rustled through the aspen trees. A crow called from somewhere nearby. No answers came, because there were no answers. Just choices and consequences, and the slow, painful work of rebuilding a life after betrayal. I drove home as the sun set, the mountains turning purple in the fading light. Tomorrow I'd go hiking again. Next week I had 3 financial literacy classes scheduled. Next month there was a conference on elder abuse prevention in Grand Junction that Elena had invited me to speak at. Life continued. Not the life I'd imagined. Not the happy retirement I'd planned with Margaret, surrounded by family and grandchildren that would now never exist. But a life, nonetheless. one day at a time, one foot in front of the other, surviving, which was all any of us could do in the end. If you like this story, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us continue sharing these important stories.